And a good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Attitude. My name is Jeff Owens, Interim General Manager at WEIU. My student co-host, is Mr. Tristan Thomas.
Hello, sir.
And today we're going to talk sports, Tristan, so I know it's always a fun day. In the studio, we have WEIU TV producer Ramin Carbacion.
Good afternoon.
And, of course, we have a local legend in the middle, if you're watching on TV, Mr. Dave Kidwell.
I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. It means I'm old, Jeff, but I'll take it. I'll take it as
I would
such.
never call you old because I was taught to respect my elders. Well, thanks for coming in, Dave and Ramin.
Glad to do it.
Fun show. Well, kind of a fun show. We're talking about a friend of all of ours, former EIU football coach Bob Spoo, the late Bob Spoo. WEIU Television is going to do a documentary on Coach Spoo. It's going to air later on this month, and we'll let Ramin spill the guts a little bit on that. But I thought from both of your perspectives, maybe before we get into the details, just give us an overview from your point of view as the sports information director, athletic director, all the stuff that you did here at Eastern, and Ramin from being a producer and everything from football. Just give us a background about Mr. Spoo.
Well, when you talk about being here for a long time, I was fortunate to be here when Bob was hired early in 1987. And the thing I remember, and I've said this, in fact, I said this at a memorial service we had, that when we interviewed Bob, I wasn't on the search committee, but I did go to lunch with him with several people. And at the time, there was no question about his background and his qualifications. He'd been a legend in high school coaching in the Chicago area. He'd coached at Purdue, Wisconsin. But at lunch that day, Bob was pretty soft-spoken, and that's not the image you think of a football coach that, you see, on the air and TV or on the sideline. And I thought, boy, I don't know about this. Well, he got hired come spring practice, and then I heard that booming voice out on the practice field, and that left no doubt that that he was not only well qualified, but he could handle the college level and be a head coach. So yeah, Bob had a great commanding voice, and nobody questioned it once practice or game started.
That's good. Ramin?
Well, my earliest Bob Spoo memories were when I was a kid. So Bob Spoo would have 87, so I would have been about 7 years old. As we were producing this program, I told Matt Piezinski my earliest memories of EIU football was hearing him say, "From Purdue, Bob Spoo." And lo and behold, I obviously stuck around and went to school here, so I was lucky enough to work with Dave, tape games, and interview Coach Spoo, and then come back. So I really did have a unique perspective of seeing a good vast majority of those 25 years, and it's an honor to work on this.
Well, let's give out. Let's spill the beans a little bit for the folks who don't know when and where, and is the documentary? How long is it going to be? So tell us that.
Well, the official runtime is still being worked on, but we have it slotted for about a 90-minute production, and it's Bob Spoo's legacy at EIU, and we're going to air it on November 17th on WEIU at 7 o'clock.
November 17th at 7. So there, tell your friends, tune in. And as you know, we've had some really good luck with some of our past documentaries, and I expect this one to be good. No pressure there, Ramin, all right?
Right.
Dave, when you heard that WEIU was doing a documentary on Coach Spoo, what kind of went through your mind?
Well, you reflect on the 25, 26 years he was here. Football coaches may coach that long, but they don't do it at the same school. You talk about a legend. Bob is definitely a legend here, and you hear that when players come back, when they talk about what he meant to them. And that's the first thing that came to my mind. If anybody deserves to have a documentary to document the career here at Eastern and the impact he had, it would be Bob Spoo.
Dave, you mentioned Bob's booming voice. What else did you kind of see, maybe a little bit from the outside, of what he was like to play for?
Well, that's a good question. I think the thing that sticks in my mind is Bob treated everybody fairly, and it didn't matter whether it was that third string or a starting person on that team. They knew that they were going to be held to certain standards, rules to live by on the team, the type of person he wanted them to be. I think if it had been Tony Romo who misbehaved, Tony would have found himself out the door just as quickly as a backup. I would like to think that anyway, but at any rate, that's what sticks in my mind about Bob, his character and his integrity, that there was absolutely nobody that played by the rules more than Bob Spoo, and I have a pretty good story to tell about that here.
We'll get to that. There you go.
Yeah. Well, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school or getting anybody in trouble here. I heard this secondhand, and I know it's true. Back in the day, and I'm going back several years, you could only exchange like 2 or 3 films with the other team. And you would drive and meet the other team halfway, and they would give you 3 tapes of their game, and we'd give them, 3 of our game. Well, somehow by mistake, we got a 4th tape from another team. And one of the coaches on our staff was telling Bob about this. Hey, we've got a little advantage here. We've got another tape. Had it rolling. Bob came in and said, turn it off and send it back. That's not the way we do it. Probably wouldn't have been that big a deal to watch an extra game on
It's
the
probably
opposing.
available, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to see anything different probably. But it was just the standard that Bob set, that the other team has 3 tapes of our games, we have 3 of theirs. We are not going to cheat. And nobody outside of the football stadium would have ever known this, but it was just, it's integrity and character when nobody else is looking that is what counts. That's the thing that I remember most about Bob.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's really cool. Or, I mean, the other thing we did, you did, and we did before we produced this or started producing it, we made sure that Katie Spoo, Bob's daughter, was okay with this, and she was unbelievable. Tell us a little bit about Bob Spoo's daughter.
So, yeah, before we ventured into this, you get the approval of Katie Spoo, and she was tickled to death for us to work on something like this. Now, Katie obviously is no longer in the area. She lives in Texas now. But she said, I'll help you out in whatever way we can. And so once we started the interview process, we were fortunate enough to have her. She still comes back to the Midwest. I guess she does mixed martial arts or martial arts stuff in Indianapolis. So I was able to interview her. She was the first interview. We interviewed right there on the field of O'Brien Field. And she provided me with some photos that I look forward to using every single one of them. Some of them are personal ones. Some of them are from athletics and other places that Coach Spoo has been. And they are some of the best personal photos I have seen. Some of them are probably better quality than some of the video clips that I taped back in the day, Dave. So it's good to have a still photo of a great moment. The one photo that sticks in my mind is, and it's referenced by her and Matt Piazinski, where Bob lived in Charleston. There's a photo of Bob walking Katie across the street to Carl Sandburg. I have a kid that goes to Carl Sandburg, so that one hit me pretty hard when I saw it.
That's cool. Tristan?
Yeah, Ramin, what else have you been able to gather as far as Coach Spoo off the field? It sounds like he was kind of had a different persona off the field, right?
Well, not to give away too much of it, but lucky enough, late in the process of gathering these interviews, one person that I stumbled across was Matt Piazinski. And Matt lived in that same neighborhood with Bob Spoo and a few other people. Found out that Matt also went to church with Bob Spoo, and I'm trying to incorporate the big booming voice of Bob Spoo in there because there's a great church story about a speaking role he had there, so I'm not going to give that away. But he was a churchgoer, and apparently, according to Katie, he liked to sing.
I would jump in and say Bob he had a great voice. If there ain't any question, you mentioned he sang in the choir. Every year preseason, we would have a booster club picnic to kick off the season, and at the end of the picnic, we always sang the fight song, and Bob was the one that led us in the fight song, and he got everybody up and everybody involved, but he was the one that led it. So yeah, he had a great voice.
Other memories while we're just kind of gabbing here? The stories are the best part when you go behind the scenes of something like this.
Well, I wrote down a bunch of notes here, Jeff, but I think this program it's a personal accounts of all the people that I was able to interview. And as we were sitting down, and I thought, well, this is also a sports program, so we're going to dive into some of those moments and the teams like that kind of happened that people remember, outstanding games. So, and fortunate enough, Dave was able to help out with, talk a little bit about some of that early history with Bob Spoo, and then some of those, like the 2002 team that Tony Romo had and Tony's shining moment. So those are things that are going to come across in this program, in addition to people's firsthand accounts, whether they coached, played for, or knew him personally.
And Dave, if I remember right, when we had you on a previous show when we were talking about Coach Spoo, his early years was not real successful, correct? And there was some, whispers that he might not make it through the first contract or so.
Yeah, really struggled early on, and I believe it was the '94 season that we started out 2-5, and Bob knew he had to have a winning season to survive. And we ended up beating Indiana State that started a 4-game winning streak. Team ended up 6-5, and It's interesting. Pete Mock was the quarterback who came off the bench and engineered a drive that got us going against Indiana State. Every time I see Pete, I remind him that he saved Coach Spoo's job. Pete's pretty humble about that and doesn't like to take credit. But yeah, the writing was on the wall, and it looked like that '94 was going to be the end. But we ended up having a winning season. Then we went into a couple playoff years, and it took off from there. And yeah, I think we had 9 postseasons in Bob's 25 years.
If I could interject, doing this project here, interviewing these people and not knowing who I was going to get, and then you start asking about this experience or this team or that team, and one of those teams that I have listed as a result of doing the interview and learning things, I think that '94 team became what happened because we have Tim Carver, Chris Wilkerson, Willie High, they were all teammates. I didn't know I was going to get all these guys, and they all had some accounts of that '94 season. Dave referenced it when talking about it. And, it's kind of one of those, the Bob Spoo story at EIU may have stopped there, but the account of that team coming together and getting a winning streak and then having one of the most successful teams that Bob had in '95.
Right.
You forgot one thing, Willie High from Mattoon.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Mattoon is mentioned by Willie High 2 or 3 times.
Always have to get that in, Dave. Yeah, there you go. Speaking of that, Ramin, you might have probably, Tristan wanted to ask the same thing. Could you run through some of the list of people? You don't have to give up the entire what they talked about during the document. Who all did you get to talk to talk about this?
All right, so the rundown, and this is not all of the sound you're going to hear because I'm diving into the WEIU archives, but I actually have it written in order of who I interviewed when. So Katie Spoo was the first interview. Then I had the trio from Syracuse of Mike Lynch, Roy Whitkey, and Dino Babers. Chris Wilkerson, who's now at the University of Chicago. Ryan Pace of the Chicago Bears. Dave. Ray DeLessio. Tim Carver. Current EIU coach Adam Cushing. Matt Piazinski. Willie High, and our final interview was with Mike Brad a couple months ago. 13 interviews, 7 via Zoom, 6 in person, and Willie High was the one that I went out of Charleston to do the interview because he resides in Monticello now.
And kind of following up and jumping in here on this, Ramin, I think one of Bob's strengths was picking excellent assistant coaches, knowing that they weren't going to stay here. It was a stepping stone. And Bob was probably the first one to help them move on, but it's remarkable, and we could be here all day filling names of where they went. Several went on to be head coaches at other colleges. A couple have been in the pros. It's remarkable the legacy that he left in terms of assistant coaches who've had success other places.
There you go.
Ramin, did you find out maybe like where it all started for Coach Spoo of wanting to be a coach?
Well, this particular program, that's probably maybe a before EIU question because it's known where Coach Spoo was before that. He had Big Ten stops. He had a successful high school run there. Obviously, he got to play in the Big Ten as a quarterback at Purdue. So, the football journey for Bob Spoo, got going there. But maybe Dave could answer. Maybe do you get the sense that Bob was meant to be a coach?
Did he always want to be a coach, I guess?
You know, that is a good question. I don't have an answer for that either.
There's our journalism dude over there.
Yeah, that's one I wish I would have asked Bob. Who influenced him? He played at Chicago St. Rita High School, which has been a powerhouse for a gazillion years. And then, as mentioned, went on at Purdue and was a quarterback there. But who influenced him, I really don't know. He went back, played after college, went back and played on a semi-pro team in Chicago and worked briefly for the Chicago Park District before he got into high school coaching. And then there was a person named, I don't think there's anybody listening who's going to know a name, John Jardine. But he was from Chicago. He knew Bob, and he was the head coach at the University of Wisconsin. He was the one that hired Bob that got him into college coaching. So I can say that is a name that did have influence at some point in Bob's career. But who was the one that convinced him not to go sell insurance or be a lawyer or be a doctor to get into coaching? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
And this program is the 25 years that Bob Spoo was at EIU coaching, and he had 25 other years coaching. So this is the last half. So the Bob Spoo story could be a lot longer if we talked about all of it. But this is focused just on the EIU aspect.
Yeah.
When you found out he was going to retire, Dave, I mean, what Your feelings, your thoughts at the end of his career here at EIU? What was going through your mind?
You know, it was interesting. I was working part-time then, and my office was out in Lance, so I had more time than I probably should have had. Bob's office was 20 feet down the hall, and we'd go in and chat once in a while, and I knew, you know, this was his life. And Bob and I both talked about that neither one of us had a hobby, and what do you do in retirement? And I think that concerned him, which is one reason that he stayed as long as he did into coaching, that he just loved coming in the office. He loved, you know, twiddling around with plays here and there and working with assistant coaches and the athletes. So I think as much as anything, he did not look forward to retirement for that simple reason. Was not sure what the next step was going to be. So it really didn't surprise me. His health was not great the last couple of years. He'd battled some various illnesses, and so I think that entered into his mind also. And so yeah, it didn't come as a total surprise, but it was a concern that I know he had.
There you go. We're talking to Dave Kidwell and Ramin Carbacion today about the upcoming WEIU TV documentary regarding former EIU coach Bob Spoo, which will air November 17th at 7 o'clock on WEIU TV. Ramin and Dave, you can both answer this, but mostly I think this is for Ramin, is when you were putting this documentary and as you were putting this documentary together, is there any surprises or things that you learned that you had no idea about Coach Spoo, or even maybe some of his players or the people you talked to?
I'm just wowed by the word symmetry, the same comments. I mean, they feel this strongly about Coach Spoo. You have people like Chris Wilkerson, who was a team leader, a team captain, and then he mentions in the program, I was going to go be this, and he was going to be a teacher, but Coach Spoo asked him, well, did you ever think about coaching? And Chris Wilkerson has been coaching since 1995. And so those kinds of things and how they've impacted them. Ray DeLassio, of WEIU fame also,
yep.
CNN fame. Ray is still in media, but some of the things that Coach Spoo, like, you know, he was kind of like a second father figure. When you hear these, you know, comments, probably the most awesome comment, probably the best compliment anyone could ever say about someone. Ryan Pace and maybe a few other people said it. He made us better men. There you go.
Comments when you hear stuff like that, Dave? Bring back memories?
It does. I think, you know, one thing I would say is I would hope everybody's fortunate enough to say that their parents were the people that they most looked up to. But next to that, I think I don't have any more respect for anybody other than Bob Spoo, echoing what players and coaches have said about him. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back to that 94 team a little bit where, you know, start out with 2-5 record and then eventually you get the turnaround with the 4-game win streak. Is that just seems like it's, you know, really speaks to his like steadiness as a coach of, you know, doing the same thing, you know, treating people the same way. Do you think that season really kind of showed that?
I'll jump first. Dave lived it. So, I mean, the thing about that 94 team that set up that story within this story is that they did have one good year in 1989, but the early part of the 90s were not good record-wise. I think Chris Wilkerson said it. My senior year, it's lo and behold, you know, we didn't win while I was playing here at EIU. And it got to that point where, you know, everybody kind of knew, well, if we don't win out this season or get some wins, you know, for us seniors and for Bob, that's it.
You know, again, another good question, Tristan. I'm trying to think back to that year. I remember we walk off the field at Western Illinois losing. We're 2-5, and I said, that's it. You know, we may win another game, we may not, but I didn't think there was any way that we'd end up with a winning season. And so it speaks to the leaders on that team, again, Pete Mock, Chris Wilkerson, you know, Willie High, guys that just refused to quit. But if you had some formula, how do you go from 2-5 when it looks like that's the end and win 4 games? If you could bottle that formula, every coach in America would like to have it. And I'm not trying to make light of your question. I don't know how it happened. You know, we're going on 30 years, and I still don't know how.
But I think that's what makes us all love sports. You just don't know what's going to happen every day.
You don't. I mean, again, I mentioned, and you had to see it, and it's corny to say this, but Pete Mock, they benched him in favor of a younger quarterback who wasn't getting it done. Pete comes in, moves the team down the field. We beat Indiana State, and you're scratching your head. Okay, there's 1. And then we go out and win next week. Okay, there's now 2. But now you start to believe, hey, maybe we can end up with this winning streak. Did the players know that coach's job was on the line? I'm sure the older players knew that. The younger ones probably didn't. They're probably still trying to figure out how to put the helmet and the shoulder pads on. But I'm sure the older guys knew that, and that just adds pressure to, I'll use the word, kids that are 21 years old. Now we got to save the coach's job. I don't know if that went through their mind. So somehow it all came together and it happened. And to this day, I can't explain it.
But I've heard that in a lot of sports. You don't want to be the guy that gets your coach fired. I mean, kids do come together at times. It doesn't always work out, but I've heard that happen.
Yeah.
Ramin, as a producer director, I'm going to ask you probably the toughest question we're going to ask you today. But when you're putting together a documentary about 25 years of a guy's life, and you interview 10, 12 people, how do you decide what goes in, what goes out? I mean, take us through some of the process.
Well, I'm still putting it together, but
you got 16 days.
It's not going to get down to the 16th day, I can tell you that. But a program like this, I think the answer is, the way I like to put things together is usually chronological. So going to start from the beginning. And there might be a little bit of jumping around, but I think you tell a person's story of time is going to be chronological. So, we're going to start with Katie and Dave, and you're going to hear Dino Babers at the very beginning, because Dino was on Bob Spoo's first staff. And so that's kind of been my formula to this point, and I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product too.
I think we all are. It's pretty exciting, and I haven't seen hardly any of it other than when I walk by your edit bays and you tell me to get out because you're busy. Dave, obviously we appreciate you coming in today, and we have about 5 minutes left with you today. I know you've been retired for a while. You retired once and took the part-time job at Eastern. Now you're officially retired, right? So what have you been up to? I know you don't like any press, but you are another great figure from Eastern Athletics over the last 35 years. So what are you doing right now? What's up with you?
Well, I'd love to say we're traveling, but the last couple of years we've kind of had to hang around the house. Although we've got two grandsons that we are fortunate to see often up in Chicago. They're 3.5 and a little over 1. So that's been a great blessing for my wife and I to be able to visit them and watch them grow and kind of sharing that. So yeah, nothing beats grandkids. So I suppose that's been the highlight the last 2 or 3 years during this pandemic period, where it's difficult to do much more than be around the house.
But you did decide to stay in Charleston upon retirement. Was that always in the plans, or
Oh, I'm not sure about plans, but that's where we are. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you think about Eastern football, you think about Bob Spoo. We have a few minutes left here. Is there any other stories or stuff that you want to make sure that you get out today, or you want to talk about? Because I'd love to hear the stuff from you all about the stories of Bob Spoo.
One of the moments that is going to be shared, I was fortunate to tape many Bob's Eastern football games through the years. I'd like to thank Dave for helping carry me along as I cut my teeth there in those 20-some years ago, and because I was the videographer that went to all the games and worked on Panther Country, the former coach's show, and I remember Dave vividly handing me the playlist. Here's what Bob's going to go over. So that was a fun memory, and I thank Dave for that. But I think one of the last great wins for the Panthers with Bob Spoo was the 2009 game at Jacksonville State. It's one of the last football games I was able to travel out of state to, so I'm lucky I was able to do that. But that was such a great matchup of two teams. So many great plays. And it was the first and only time that I can recall that I've gone inside the locker room. I just felt like, wow, everybody's jacked up, and got one of those great post-game coach moments from Coach Spoo, and it'll stick with me forever.
Yeah, if there's one thing, and I don't know if it'll come out in these interviews, let's don't make any mistake, Bob Spoo loved to win. He disliked losing immensely. He was a true football coach. I think Mike Brad said it wasn't about style, it was about substance. Game face. I think it's corny when you talk about a game face of coaches lots of times. But I know on Wednesday out in the stadium, I would say something to Bob. Hey, Bob, how you doing today? Fine. Okay. It wasn't disrespectful, but I could tell by Wednesday he was focused on winning a football game on Saturday.
That's awesome. Those are the stories I love. Tristan?
Yeah, Ramin, I got one more. Are there any other teams that are really a focus of this documentary? Anything else you kind of want to outline?
So chronologically, the teams that kind of get highlighted a little bit, maybe more than others, but because some of them were the great successes, was the '89 team. Ray DeLessio talked about that. Ray was the kicker on the team. He talked about the frozen tundra of Missoula, Montana, kicking in those elements. Talked about the '94 team. That was kind of an unexpected as far as the storytelling process, interviewing everybody. I think it's a story within the story. The 2002 team, Tony Romo, the Tony Romo era, but Tony had probably his greatest moment at EIU there. I actually have two different camera angles of the great run. I acquired it from another local station here in Central Illinois, and the 2009 Jacksonville State game, kind of highlighting that. It was such a colorful game, and really, as we talk about football, and all of us know football, all three phases that day helped the Panthers win that game.
There you go. A couple minutes left here with Ramin Carracion and Dave Kidwell. Dave, any other thoughts on Coach Bob Spoo?
Well, I think I saw the clip you did with Dino talking about I miss him, and I do too. It was always fun to talk with Bob earlier in the week or in postseason.
Bye-week, maybe.
Bye-week, whatever in there. Whenever he was more relaxed, a man of a variety of instruments, a family man, a community man. Lots of times these coaches never get out of the office, and that was not the case with Bob. He certainly put in the hours and the time, but he certainly made Eastern a great place to work and his community a better place to live with his family and his doctor. And his wife, Sue, taught here. So, yeah, they made great contributions to the community, and I miss them all.
There you go. Ramin, I'm going to let you wrap this thing up with a thought on the coach and then give us those details on the debut of the Bob Spoo documentary coming up on WEIU.
I didn't know who I was going to get for this program, but I'm very happy with the 13 people I was able to interview, whether in person or via media technologies of today. Bob Spoo really cared about the people around him, and it shows by these comments, and they're certainly all better for that. Hope people tune in and check out the emotion and learn a little EIU football history along the way. Bob Spoo's legacy at EIU, November 17th on WEIU. As one football player once said, get your popcorn ready. There's a lot of football and Bob Spoo to dive into there.
It's November 17th, 7 p.m., around a 90-minute documentary.
Somewhere around there, yes.
There you go. So I know that's good. I mean, the longer the better, I think, when it comes to local programming. That's been my philosophy.
I don't want to cut people's comments out if I don't get in too much of a time bind. So look forward to sharing as much of those comments as possible.
And Mr. Kidwell, it's always good to see you, my friend. It's been a while, and I'm glad you're doing great. And I do appreciate you coming in today and what you helped with Ramin on the dock. So it's great to see you, my friend.
Yeah, and a pat on the back for Ramin for all of his hard work here.
So, everybody, hope you enjoyed this show. November 17th, 7 p.m. on WEIU television. I know it sounds like we're pre-promoting it, but I am really looking forward to this one. Ramin, thank you for doing this. Again, Dave, good seeing you. Everybody, have a great day. We are WEIU.